Welcome to Standard 8A. I'm taking a little break from shoveling this morning to talk a little Napoleon and the Congress of Vienna, including changes in political boundaries in Europe around 1815. Okay, the essential question that we're trying to answer in this standard is, what was the legacy of an important figure in history named Napoleon? Okay, and a legacy are the things left behind or remembered about someone. I suppose in years ahead you'll talk about the legacy of this snowstorm. This is a storm you'll be talking about years from now. The essential understanding we want to know going into this standard is that Napoleon and the French Revolution, the two kind of go together, and they leave behind a legacy of a more secular society. The world is a little more worldly, outwardly non-religious in terms of government today. Nationalism, that sense of love and pride in your country that we associate Napoleon with, and for nationalism and for Napoleon, he inspires those feelings of nationalism. And more democratic ideas, okay, the idea that everybody is of value in society, that everybody should have a say in society and how it's run. These are legacies of Napoleon and the French Revolution. Okay, some essential understanding about Napoleon himself. Napoleon attempts to unify Europe under French domination. That's mainly what he's known in world history for, as a conqueror of a large part of Europe. But he's going to be unsuccessful in that attempt. He comes close, he conquers quite a bit, but doesn't get all the way to his goal. The standard really doesn't give us much about Napoleon that we need to know, but he is such a significant figure. We see Napoleon here as a young soldier in the French Revolution. But during the Revolution, he's going to rise very quickly through the ranks of the military. To just quickly go back to the French Revolution, remember when the French Revolution breaks out and they chop off Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI's head, that made a lot of European countries with kings and queens angry. Okay, not only because they were kings and queens, but because they were related many times to Louis and or Marie Antoinette, so they attacked France. Napoleon is one of the key figures from France's point of view who helps to repel that attack. Napoleon kind of pushes the outside forces back into Europe, and in the process takes over the countries that had been attacking France. He rises very quickly, and by the start of the 1800s, he's now actually the emperor of all of France. So he goes from being just a soldier in the streets at the beginning of the revolution to being the emperor of all of France. We see him here crowning his wife, his wife Josephine, the empress of all of France. Okay, so Napoleon, we can see, takes over quite a bit here. Everything that's not that orangish, yellowish color was part of Napoleon's French Empire. He makes the very bad mistake of attacking Russia too late in the year. He gets stuck in the Russian winter, and as bad as this might be, Russian winters can typically be a lot worse. Okay, and Napoleon is forced to retreat. Okay, he's sent into exile on a little island called Elba, but he escapes, and for about another year goes on a rampage until finally defeated at the Battle of Waterloo, which is the end of Napoleon, and then he gets sent off into exile again. He lives out the rest of his days there before he dies. So just a little background on Napoleon, because the standards really focus on his legacies and not Napoleon himself. So we want to know some of these legacies of Napoleon. Okay, the first is Napoleon creates what's known as the Napoleonic Code. If you think back to your World I class, you learned about Hammurabi's Code, you learned about Justinian's Code. A code is a set of laws. And after all the chaos and violence that erupted during the French Revolution, a lot of destruction, a lot of rebuilding needed to be done, and you need laws, you need rules in order to begin rebuilding. Napoleon's code, Napoleon's laws, were one of the first codes of laws that applied equally to all people. Things like Hammurabi's Code, things like Justinian's Code, they weren't equally applied from top to bottom, from rich to poor. Different groups had certain privileges under the law. Okay, Napoleon's going to say no more of this. We're not going to have a system where the first and second estate have privilege and the third estate has none. Napoleon's code gets rid of that. Napoleon's code also establishes an idea of freedom of religion. Again, France, like most of Europe, had struggled with violence and tension between religious groups. From Napoleon's point of view, you were French. Okay, and if you were French, it didn't matter what religion you were. You had the freedom to practice whatever religion that you wanted. And the other thing Napoleon's code creates is a meritocracy, a society and a government where jobs are awarded to the best qualified. In the old system, prior to the French Revolution, certain positions, certain jobs could only be held by people in the first and second estates. Under Napoleon's laws, all of those government jobs are going to be open to everybody, regardless of what class they came from, and those jobs are going to be awarded based on merit, based on how qualified you were. Okay, the second legacy we want to know of Napoleon is he attempts to unify all of Europe under French domination. Again, Napoleon sends out his armies to try and conquer all of Europe. Even though he's not successful, we do see the effect of it in things like this. French law is known as civil law. Okay, and that style of law spreads out through most of continental Europe with Napoleon and his armies. Notice Great Britain, the United Kingdom there, which is the basis of American laws. They have a system of law called common law. So sometimes Americans look at law in continental Europe with a little bit of confusion, and likewise people in continental Europe maybe not understanding American law. There is a difference, and we just see that as a legacy and an effect. Even though countries like Germany and Spain and Italy might not like to admit that France had once taken them over, there are legacies of Napoleon's conquests. Okay, also Napoleon is going to awaken feelings of nationalism, and this is really the main one that we want to know of Napoleon. Napoleon, for the French who had been, through lots of war and violence, Napoleon makes the French proud of France again. We see the Arc de Triomphe here in Paris, which was built during Napoleon's rule to celebrate and honor French soldiers and French victories over other European armies. But likewise, just as it was now cool to be French again, in the countries that Napoleon took over, they suddenly felt a feeling of togetherness themselves, not a feeling of being part of the French Empire, but they start to resent having French rulers. And so in Spain and the Italian states and the German states, we start to see a rise of nationalism as well. This is a famous painting by a Spanish artist named Goya, and it commemorates the events of the 3rd of May, 1808. The guys we see on the right here are French soldiers, and Goya purposely paints them very anonymously. We don't see them, but we see very clearly the faces of the Spanish soldiers who are being executed. And in particular, this guy here, and in Catholic Christian Spain, the positioning of this soldier, it was very symbolic. Any person in Spain looking at this in 1808 would understand that Goya was comparing the Spanish soldiers to Christ. This is a Christ-like pose of Jesus's death. Even down to the point that Goya paints in the painting on the hands of this guy the hole marks, the nail marks that Jesus would have had being nailed up on a cross. That's a very nationalistic idea. To say that your soldiers are the same as an important religious figure makes them more than just soldiers. Okay, and that shows nationalism rising in Spain. I'm sorry if I had to put the highlight there. Another example of this we can take from Russia. We can see Napoleon, as we mentioned, really comes undone after attacking Russia and getting stuck in the Russian winter. But for Russia, this was a highlight because the Russian army's defeat Napoleon and his French army, send them packing back to home. And many of you may have heard this song before, which is an example of Russian nationalism. A Russian composer named Tchaikovsky wrote this in 1812, the 1812 overture, to celebrate Russia's victory. Okay, so if you've ever heard that song, that's an example of Russian nationalism. So both the painting by Goya and the music by Tchaikovsky are examples of nationalism rising in Europe. Okay, the second part of this standard has to do with the Congress of Vienna. We want to know the significance or the importance of this event called the Congress of Vienna. And the Congress of Vienna was a meeting that was held in 1815 to reorganize Europe after the Napoleonic Wars. France and the rest of Europe were really at war for almost 15 years. So there was a lot to be reorganized and rebuilt. The essential understanding we need to know here is that the Congress of Vienna, its main goal was to restore Europe, to bring it back to its original condition, as it had been before the French Revolution and the Napoleonic conquest, Napoleon's wars. We can see on the map Vienna is the capital of Austria. Okay, we see here a painting of the meeting where the rulers of Europe and their representatives come together in Vienna to discuss what to do. And the whole idea was that all those guys in that room, they really wanted to turn back the hands of time to before Napoleon and the French Revolution. Okay, so these guys really are going to create four different legs. It is cold. The first one here is the restoration of monarchies. Napoleon had pretty much chased off all the ruling families of Spain and the Italian states and the German states, and they wanted to bring back hereditary monarchies, which are when the crown is passed down from parent to child. We see in this picture a Habsburg family. The Habsburgs ruled a lot of area in Europe. Napoleon came from a pretty big family. Okay, and so Napoleon is going to take France for himself. He's going to kick out the other kings and queens. He gives his older brother Spain. He didn't really like his second brother for some reason. He doesn't get hooked up with any territory. He gives his brother Louis the Netherlands. His brother Jerome gets some area in what's now Germany. And he even sets up his sisters with various pieces of land here down in Italy. So in other words, Napoleon's family, really, their business now became ruling Europe. Okay, the Congress of Vienna is going to undo all of that. The second thing that the Congress of Vienna does is it creates a balance of power. From the meeting at the Congress of Vienna's point of view, part of the problem was that France had gotten too strong, and they wanted to be able to balance out countries, okay, so that no one country was too strong. In order to do that, the Congress of Vienna is going to redraw the political map of Europe. They're going to take out the map of Europe and adjust the boundaries to make the countries more balanced in terms of their power. You can see the problem here from the Congress of Vienna's point of view. In 1799, before Napoleon, we see France there, but next door, what's now Germany, was very weak. So the Congress of Vienna was actually hundreds of little states, which were very easy for the French army to conquer. 1815, we see a lot of that has now changed. These countries now went from over 100 to, I think, just a couple of dozen little countries, which are now a little bit stronger than they were before and better able to defend themselves against somebody like Napoleon. Okay, and then the last one here is that new political philosophies emerge. The ideas of liberal and conservative develop. Really, the basic difference here is liberals look out the window and say things need to change. Things are so bad now, change will make things better. Conservatives look out the window and say things are fine, change will only make things worse. Okay, so it's really how you look out that window onto the world. The leaders at the Congress of Vienna, some of them were liberal. Okay, and some of them were conservative. But really it's the conservatives who win out. Their view of Europe wins out. Okay, and before I freeze to death out here, I'm going to wrap up Standard 8A, and that's about it.